Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Lieutenant Stephen Rogers here on the East Coast of the United States of America. Welcome to you for joining us this evening from our wonderful friends in the great nation of Canada, here in America, and in Europe and Australia and Iceland. Boy, I could go on, but thanks so much for joining us. We'll get right to it, folks. We're not going to give up on Canada. We're not going to be distracted from what's going on in Canada, because they are indeed our closest friends, our closest ally, our best friends, if you will. And we have to make sure that we watch their backs, because I tell you, whenever America was in trouble or had problems, the Canadians watched our backs. And although our president, if you call him or want to call him a leader, which I'll tell you, this is a country here in America, I feel like I'm on a ship without a captain and without a crew. But the American people are standing with the Canadian people. And it just so happens that we still, here in America, control the government. The government doesn't control us, although they give us a hard time. And so do the people in Canada. They still control their government, although they're getting a hard time from the government leaders who probably, folks, more than probably, but very likely will be out of office during the next round of Canadian elections as well as U.S. elections. But there's something very bad among all the bad things that are going on just north of us in Canada. I mean, something really bad. That is going to be affecting the United States real soon if we don't help our Canadian friends put a stop to this. You know, the Communist Party has a history of going after all sorts of rights, correct? Right? I mean, they go everybody's rights of free speech, rights of this, rights of that. But their primary target, ladies and gentlemen, is the right to worship. The communists know full well that any country that has a God to believe in, a God to worship, is a country that has eternal hope. They know that. So what they try to do, and what they have done successfully in communist China, and communist Cuba, in communist Venezuela, in the old communist Soviet Union, what they tried to do in some cases, and were very successful, is remove any belief in God from the people of that nation. And in my view, I believe that this is exactly what the Trudeau government is trying to do. I mean, that guy up there, Trudeau, I mean, the more I read about him, the more I believe I'm reading about somebody who was born in Beijing, China, for goodness sakes. I mean, he seems to be very close, very cuddling with the communist Chinese. Now, I'm not calling him a communist, but I am going to say that he pretty much supports a communist doctrine of communist policies by his actions. But something else is going on, too. We have a U.S. Senator here in the United States. His name is Josh Hawley. He has asked that Canada be investigated for violating religious freedom over the arrest of Alberta pastors accused of flouting COVID-19 restrictions. Now, from what I understand, these pastors are accused of flouting, all right, of disregarding, if you will, COVID-19 restrictions by doing what? They were exercising their right to worship. That's what they were doing. And the only place this happens on the face of the earth where religious leaders and pastors and ministers, etc., are arrested are in communist countries. Now, in a letter released Thursday, he's a Missouri Republican. He has asked his countries, that means America's, our country, America's Commission on International Religious Freedom, to consider putting Canada on its special watch list. And here's what he said, folks. This should really bring some spirit to the Canadian people. I know you're not getting the news that you should be getting, but you're going to get it from us. Here's what he said. I am troubled that our Canadian neighbors are effectively being forced to gather in secret, undisclosed locations to exercise their basic freedom to worship, Halley wrote. Then he goes on to say that the only place, folks, he says, frankly, I would expect this sort of religious crackdown in communist China, not in a prominent Western nation like Canada. Now, that is a United States senator. And he's made it pretty clear that he is not happy with Trudeau, not happy with his government, and not happy that he's clamping down on religious freedom in his nation. Now, tonight, I'm going to introduce to you an individual. His name is Sterling Schwab. He is running for the United States Congress in New Jersey's Congressional District number 7. Now, Mr. Schwab got in touch with me when he heard our broadcast regarding some of the freedoms in Canada being hindered or taken away by the Canadian government. Mr. Schwab is a patriot. He's an American who loves his country. And at this moment right now, I'm going to let you know that not only do we help you in word, but we're going to help you indeed. So I'd like to introduce to you right now, Mr. Sterling Schwab. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Steve, thank you for having me this evening. I really appreciate it. As far as what you're saying about Senator Josh Hawley, he and I have a little bit in common. My family's roots go back deep in Missouri. I spent most of my childhood summers in the western part of Missouri. As you might know, it's called the Show Me State. And I think, unfortunately, what Mr. Hawley and the rest of us are being shown is, religious persecution. And, I want to remind our friends in Canada, they've tried that here in the United States as well. Early on in this pandemic, if people remember, they were trying to prevent American citizens from going to church. And then on top of it, to add insult to injury, especially in Las Vegas, if we all recall, they were allowing the casinos to stay open, and across many, many states in this country, they were allowing strip joints to stay open, and yet you couldn't go to church. So the difference, I think, between us and Canada right now, Steve, is in the United States, we've already told the elected officials how the next vote is going to go, and they've begun to take notice of that. And unfortunately, you see the Democratic Party changing their message a little bit, but not necessarily their tactics. They're trying to soften the message slightly, but not much more than that.
Well, let me follow up on that. Now, Mr. Schwab, folks, just mentioned something that I had spoken with you time and time again about. What type of action can you take? People are asking me what type of action. Well, Mr. Schwab just articulated the type of action comes from the grassroots people, and you don't have to be that well organized. Now, I was in Gloucester County, New Jersey, Sunday night with my wife. We were listen to this, Mr. Schwab. We were at a Republican dinner, and while we were there, we were speaking to many, many people, and lo and behold, we ran into, at that dinner, dozens of Democrats who became Republicans, but not only grassroots Democrats, but mayors, senators, people running for Congress. They have become Republicans. And the reason why they've become Republicans is because here in America, we are the conservative party who believes in what you see right here.
Absolutely.
You see? So can you just expound upon that, Mr. Schwab, a little more about the importance of people not being disheartened, not being overwhelmed by the bullying? Because that's what Trudeau does. That's what Biden does. They all bully people.
That's what they've always done. And what you said earlier, what you said earlier about the Communist Party, that they've always done that. That is just the way the left has always acted. If you look back in our history, back in the 60s, the 50s, and then all the way back to the 1860s and 1870s. They are bullies. They threaten. If it gets really bad and they think they're going to be voted out of office, they'll try to soften it a little bit. But basically, you're looking at bullies. And that's one reason I've decided to get involved in this race. You look around what's going on and you say, our founding fathers set this country up so that every citizen had the right to vote. But as we know, it takes more than that now. You have to get out and you have to fight for what you believe in. And, as a Republican and a conservative, our convictions should go before us. If we believe in our country, we believe in democracy, capitalism, freedom of thought, freedom of speech. It's not that difficult. And yet on the left, they find insult in those basic freedoms. And unfortunately for our Canadian brothers and sisters, they're running into that right now. So my heart goes out to them. It really does.
There have been Canadian citizens, truckers, pastors who have been arrested and jailed, bank accounts frozen. What astonished me was this. When a police chief, acting chief, I believe, sent a message out to the public well after the protest that we're going to identify you and we're going to come to get you. Doesn't that talk about communism? I mean, isn't it what communists do?
Yeah. Absolutely. It certainly is. And you look at the two pastors, James Coate and Tim Stevens, they were targeted. They were absolutely targeted. They came into their house, full police force, and arrested them. And we've experienced that same thing here. So it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody that Canada and the United States have mimicked each other a little bit in this regard. It's really unconscionable, and it's really historically will go down as a really dark mark in our history. 50, 60 years from now, when they start writing the history on this, our great grandchildren are going to be astounded at the history they read about us and how silly it really became, and dangerous to a large extent.
Well, which brings me to the point, ladies and gentlemen, especially those of you who are listening in Canada and in other nations, stand up, speak out, work within the framework of the law. Don't give anybody any excuse to say, well, you started a riot or you did this and you did that. This past weekend, I understand Canadians all over their country had a Hands Across Canada type event. It went very well. It went very well.
Great, that's good.
But you know what, Sterling? I also, and I'm glad you mentioned it earlier about people getting involved. Folks, you may not hear the success stories of your works. You may not see the fruits of your labor, if you will. But Sterling, we see it now. You've been on the campaign trail. I know that because people have called me. And the question was, why are you focused on Canada? You're running for United States Congress, and you're the only one who reached out and said, we have neighbors north of us who need our help. Why are you focused on that?
You know, Canada and the United States, our history is close. We're not, to use the word allies is not even close to what the relationship is between us and Canada. It is really a friendship that goes, beyond borders. There are families in the United States that have families in Canada and vice versa. Yes, we're two different countries, but it's much closer than that. It's not like a relationship between us and another country like Mexico or Germany or Italy or maybe Japan. This relationship is a rock solid relationship. It is, I said our brothers and sisters in Canada. A lot of times, that's what it is. I was in Basking Ridge 2 Saturdays ago, knocking on doors. And the guy answered the door, and his wife came to the door. She signed my ballot, so my paperwork, so I can get on the ballot. And I asked him if he's interested in signing, and he said he would love to sign. He said, "But I'm a Canadian. I'm married to my wife, but and he said I'm a proud Canadian. I don't want to give up my citizenship and become an American." How could you not understand that? He married this beautiful woman, moved to the United States, but he wants to keep his Canadian citizenship. You cannot, ever fault somebody, that wants to keep their Canadian citizenship. So I commend people like that. We had a great long conversation about Canada.
One more thing before you go. We're both from New Jersey, and yes. I'm sure you have seen what I see in the summertime, that not hundreds, but thousands of Canadians go into our shore area. Thousands of them.
We spend a lot of time yes, absolutely.
And you know how we could tell it's summertime is that when we're on the Garden State Parkway, ladies and gentlemen, that comes north to south, all you see is Canadian flags on cars. We say, great, summer's here. Our buddies are back.
Yeah. And by the way, Canadians, if they're renting a shore house, you will see them hang the Canadian flag outside.
Yeah.
You will see it.
Pride, right?
Yeah.
Well, all right. Well, I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to get into Joe Biden's war in a minute. And I know you got to go, but any last words to the American people and the Canadian people, since we happen to be in this together?
I had a woman. I knocked on a door and I walked into this woman's kitchen. She invited me in, and I had a long conversation with her and her husband. And she said to me, "Don't ever think there's not more of us than them. There is." She said, "We just don't come out. We're not obnoxious. We're below the radar. We don't need to argue. We don't need to fight with you. We know what we believe in." And, we went through the entire list of challenges that we see in the country. And to a large extent, you see the same things in Canada. And she told me, "Don't be afraid." She told me, "Don't be afraid out there. There's more of us than them." And then she said, to me, "I have your back." How could you not appreciate somebody like that? Those were great words. And then she signed my ballot for me.
That's great. Well, my best to you, Mr. Schwab. I want to thank you for joining us, and I'm sure you lifted up the hearts of a lot of American citizens.
Lieutenant Stephen Rogers, thanks for all you're doing, especially with these broadcasts. They mean a lot. They really do. And it shows we're out there and we're active. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Right. Well, folks, there you have it. So this is our first political individual who has decided to come on and express his views regarding the situation in Canada. And we're going to be talking to him some more, maybe some more. So you see, what you're doing is taking effect. Now, let's get into this horrendous situation that the United States of America has been dragged into. Speaking of Canada, maybe you guys will get dragged into this too. I hope not, because you are part of NATO. But something went terribly wrong with our government when Joe Biden was elected to office. And what went terribly wrong is that we lost leadership. And whether you're a Democrat or Republican, you have to put America first. This is no longer a political war that we're playing in America. But America is now working hard and fighting for its very life. And without America, without a free country as strong as we are, Europe is in a lot of trouble. Same thing without a Canada, who's north of us. Without a strong Canada, we might find ourselves in more serious trouble than we're in. What I'm saying is, folks, without freedom and liberty being strengthened and protected around the world, there's not going to be anything left in the world to protect. So I've said all along, and I will continue to say this, and I know Democrats don't like to hear it, but look, I speak up what's on my mind. And it's important that we're going to be transparent, and that if we got something to say, we say it, but we also respect everyone else's opinion. So those of you who don't like what I'm about to say, all I'm going to say to you is that I may disagree with you, but I respect your opinion. So I would hope that you would respect mine. As I look at where we are today with regard to Ukraine, I see where the President of the United States, Joe Biden, was one of the people who instigated where we are now. Because I remember clearly, months before this invasion, Joe Biden would continuously poke his finger in the eyes of Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin is a bad actor, folks. He is indeed a killer. He's proven that. He's a bad person. All right. And Joe Biden should know that when you corner a very bad person, a person who is hell-bent on destroying an entire country, who is hell-bent on taking control of the lives of not only people in other countries, but in his own nation, and hell-bent on reconstituting the Soviet Union, you know, the evil empire, Joe Biden should have known better. You put that type of individual, any psychologist will tell you this, you put them in a corner and they're going to strike back. The interesting thing about all this is that Putin did not have any secrets. He said he would hit, and he would hit hard. And he kept on making one point that was given birth, folks, birth by Joe Biden, Obama, and some prior administrations. He was making one point that he did not want Ukraine part of NATO, period. That's all he was looking for, period. As time went on, Biden continued to push this idea of making Ukraine part of NATO. Now, the issue is, at least in my view, is that everyone seemed to have known. Who is everyone? NATO, the European Union, the US government, even Ukraine. Everyone seemed to have known that'll never happen because there are many obstacles, many issues, a complicated process for any country to becoming part of NATO. At this point, who would really want to become part of NATO? They're weak, they're toothless, they're tigerless. I mean, they're an embarrassment. But I'll get to that some other time. So anyway, so now time goes on, and Biden continues to push this idea that, well, we're going to make sure that Ukraine has a shot at becoming part of NATO. Now, there are two most corrupt nations on the face of the earth, and you can look this up. There are two most corrupt nations on the face of the earth. Number one is Russia, and number two is Ukraine. That's a fact, folks. You could look that up. So the European Union and those in NATO had said all along, well, you know, there's so much corruption in Ukraine, we got to think twice before we let them in. So it was never a starter, folks. It was never on the table. So then you got Joe Biden continuously just poking his finger in this guy's face. So now Putin said this, and things that I had not forgotten. He said, how would you like, you, America, would like 100,000 Russian troops on your Mexican border? How would you like us to put bases in Canada? How would you like us to form an alliance, a very strong military alliance, again, with Cuba, which he has troops there, Venezuela, and on and on and on. He was making a point. Leave us alone. This is a problem in our own backyard. We'll deal with it. We'll work with it. Now, seeing what I'm seeing now, I still believe that U.S. troops should not be going there. But I do believe that aid has to come to Ukraine to protect the innocents there. Aid has to come. But aid should come from who? It should come from the nations whose national security is in jeopardy. That's obvious. If your national security is in jeopardy, you have every right to protect yourself. Well, France, Germany, all of Europe, I would say their national security is in jeopardy. And they are the ones that need to take the lead and give the equipment, the tools, the military hardware and power that Ukraine needs to destroy the Russian army. They have the power. Collectively, they have it. Why won't they do it? And then we have Joe Biden sitting back saying, well, I don't think we should get involved in sending jets. Maybe we could wheel and deal with Poland. They could send MiGs and we'll send them RF-16s. I mean, folks, people's lives are at stake here. People are dying, kids, men, women, children. And let me just say something else. The Russian troops, I as one, I got to tell you, I sorely underestimated their might and their power. I did. I really believe that, coming up against Russia on the ground, it would be a very, very tough fight. But now we're learning that Russia has no strong military, folks. You've got citizens that are arming themselves with antique weapons, if you will, holding off the so-called military might of the Russian army. Now, a lot of people will say, well, the Russians say this, the Americans say that. I agree. You got fake news, you got propaganda on both sides. But when you see videotapes, they don't lie. So now Russia's got a problem. They haven't been able to achieve their goals within the 72 hours that they expected. They've called Chechen forces in to kill Zelensky. And those forces, by the way, you're not hearing about them because they were all killed. The Ukrainians killed them all. Now we got Syrian forces. It was on the news yesterday that are maybe asked by Putin to come into Ukraine. What's next? And now they've taken nuclear power plants, which to me now raises the level of the conflict from just a national security risk to Europe, but a national security risk to the United States. So we hear over and over again, well, we maybe shouldn't get that involved because we'll escalate this war. Folks, there's a story that I read years ago, and it really bothered me. It bothers me to this day. And if I'm wrong, I'm going to ask somebody to let me know I'm wrong. When the United States of America, during World War II, during reconnaissance flights over Germany and other parts of Europe, took pictures, they discovered the ovens, they discovered the crematoriums that the Nazis were walking and transporting Jews into. We knew where they were, folks. We knew where these camps were, these concentration camps. We knew where the Holocaust was taking place. We knew where the ovens were. And yet, when we found out, the story goes on to say that that FDR at that time, that the U.S. government decided not to bomb those crematoriums. Why? What was the reason why? I was stunned when I read that story as to why we wouldn't do it. It's because, we didn't want to escalate the war. We didn't want to kill innocent people. I mean, you've got to be kidding me. So this is what this whole excuse that Biden is making. We don't want to escalate the war. We didn't escalate the war. I would say this, and I'll stick by this, what I've said. Vladimir Putin pulled the trigger, but Joe Biden was one of the guys that gave him the gun. And that gun came in the form of running away from the Taliban in Afghanistan. That gun came when leaving Americans behind in Afghanistan. And that gun is still in Putin's hand when tonight we find out that there are Americans being held hostage in Russia. That is a fact, folks. We've got sports figures held hostage in Russia. We've got others that have been arrested and they're in Russia. And Joe Biden's his whole story, well, we really can't get that involved. We don't want to escalate this thing. So if you wonder why tyrants like Vladimir Putin could run around the world and hold the entire planet hostage, it's because of weak leadership. It's because of wokeness, folks. We've seen that in America for quite some time. Wokeness and weakness. Our troops were in classrooms learning out how to be nice, how to be, use the right pronouns when you're addressing people. And meanwhile, the Russian army was training to destroy us. But there's something else, probably more startling, more disastrous right over the horizon, worse than Vladimir Putin. And his name is President Xi. The country is Communist China. They have already sent a message, a very clear and unmistakable message to Joe Biden. You will not even think about interfering with our repatriotism of Taiwan. We're going to go get Taiwan. That's what he's saying. And you better not get involved. Now, China is emboldened to say this and probably to attack because of Joe Biden's weakness and Europe's weakness and NATO's weakness When it comes to what? When it comes to fighting a force trying to invade another country. Tonight, I was startled to read this, that out of Beijing, China tonight, they sent a message again to Joe Biden. Don't even think of creating a NATO of the Taiwan Straits, a NATO of Asia. Can you imagine that? So we got two dictators who are telling us, the entire world, not just telling us, the entire world, that they're going to control the world. You get out of line and maybe we're going to push the button. We got Trudeau worried about vaccinations. Folks, Trudeau worried about vaccinations, putting his people in jail over a vaccination, putting his people in jail over the fact that they are exercising their rights to free speech. We got a president of the United States who and this is appalling, folks. If you don't know it, you're going to hear it tonight. It'll be as appalling to you as it was to me and every American across this country. You got a president of the United States condemning Vladimir Putin on the phone every day with the Ukrainians. Don't worry, we'll help you out. And at the same time, buying oil from Russia. We're buying oil from the very people who are going to use that money to kill the people in Ukraine, to kill the people that are in maybe other countries. We don't know. But what's really bad, folks, is that if we end up in a war with Russia, it's going to be American taxpayer dollars that are going to be used to kill American men and women in combat. That is what this president has done. So you Democrats, don't go and tell me that, you know what, I don't have any ground to stand on regarding those things I said, that, I don't have the right. I have the right. I have the right. I wore the uniform for 25 years in the Navy, in a police department, 38 years. I love my country. I have the right. And we need to call out these tyrants, whether it be a Joe Biden or a Justin Trudeau, a President Xi, a Vladimir Putin. That's right. I put them in the same category, all together, bunched up, because they haven't given, in my view, they haven't given 1 ounce to help the people in their countries advance freedom and liberty, not hinder it. None of them. So whether it be Biden, Trudeau, Xi, Putin, I could add a whole bunch of them on that list. They ought to be ashamed of themselves. But like Mr. Schwab just said, we cannot be disheartened, folks. We cannot surrender. We must stand up and be strong and be tough, because we've been down this road before. Maybe not at the magnitude we're on, but we have been. 63, the Cuban Missile Crisis. Jimmy Carter, president of the United States, the worst president we ever had. But Jimmy Carter's celebrating tonight because he is now the second worst president. Joe Biden became the first worst president. And all over what? Policies that do nothing to help us. So when you all in America, and I'll say Canada and maybe other places around the world, when you go into your supermarket and somebody says to you, gee, look what the Russians did. Look what the Ukrainians did. Look who this did and do that did. The shelves are empty. Gas prices are up. No. Look what Joe Biden did. We were energy independent. Our economy was booming. Our military was strong. There was law and order on the streets of the United States of America. And every tyrant, especially that little tyrant north of us, Trudeau, he was watching this and he was being real careful, because he would know that if he got out of line, well, you know what? He may not be in office very long. Unfortunately, we had a change of administration, and little did we know that when Joe Biden promised the dark winter, we didn't know he was going to deliver the Cold War. But we are not going to be disheartened. We're going to keep our eyes on the ball. We got a U.S. Senator now already thinking about putting, or at least recommending that Trudeau be put on this watch list, his government. We got Sterling Schwab running for Congress, as well as others, very well aware of what's going on. There's a lot going on in America with our legal system, with our Senate and congressional representatives. They're speaking a lot about Canada as well as Russia. I know you're not hearing a lot of that, but from time to time, we'll bring that to you. And so, folks, for those of you in Ukraine, we pray for you. We want you to be free. We want you to be free. We want you to find liberty, and we want the protection to come your way. And unfortunately, as one of the Ukrainian citizens said on the air that I saw last night, you were lied to. Joe Biden lied to you, as he lied to the American people in Afghanistan. as he lied to the American electorate when he ran for office. He just simply lied to all of us. And it breaks my heart to have to say that about an American president. But I shall not and will never say that about the American people. The American people will always be truthful, will always be transparent. And whether we're right or wrong, when we're right, we're going to tell you we're right. When we're wrong, we're going to tell you we're wrong. But know this, that when it comes to communism and socialism, when it comes to those two things, we hate that, and we will fight to our last breath to destroy it, whether it be given birth in Canada, whether it be given birth in the United States, where it is ever born, it will not take root in this free country, the United States of America. And I'm sure many of the Canadians in the North and other countries around the world feel the same. We will stand together. We will work within the framework of the law. And what Mr. Schwab said, please don't forget what he said. It was the people. They got together. They voted out of office individuals from school board levels all the way up to the White House. We're going to get rid of them all. There's not a red wave coming across America. The color red is Republican, right? It could be a red tsunami. So I encourage Canadians to watch and see what goes on and reach out. If you need a guide, we've got guides for American people on how they could create these political action groups in their communities. Email us, okay, folks? Just email me and we'll give you the guide. We'll send a PDF file to you, okay? Now, just forgive me for one thing before I sign off. We are running a little late. Up to about 2,000 emails. A couple times we were on before nearly 250,000 people viewed our broadcast. So give us a little time, folks, and we're going to get this stuff to you. But believe me, we will. You need a guide? People say, what can I do? How can I help? Well, we've got pretty basic guide where you could get together with people. And here's something else we'll do for you. And we've done this with a lot of American people. Get about 5 or 6 people in your home. Get that computer like what you have now, turn it on, we'll come into your home. We'll get on Skype, we'll get anywhere we could do. We'll come into your home and we'll have a little roundtable discussion in your home or in a hall, something. We'll come, all right? We'll come. And if they shut us down, we'll figure another way out, all right? But at the moment, we're doing fine. America is strong. Canada is strong. The freedom and liberty around the world is strong. And remember what I've said. All of these tyrants, their story ends in the ash heap of history. Ours continue. Our story continues through our children and grandchildren who will shout from the highest mountains after remembering what you did for them in your time, in their time. And you know what they're going to shout? Let freedom ring. See you during the week. God bless you. God bless America, Canada, and every single free, loving nation on the face of the earth. I salute you. Have a great evening.